the biggest poison in us is regret.
Bad decisions, hasty decisions, too fast, and affects the next 20 years of your life because you made the wrong decision. What makes us make these fast decisions? Fear?
Let the fear of regret fuel you to take action today, now.
Be the best. Lifelong personal development requires tremendous dedication, discipline, and willpower. It is often the case that we know what we need to do, but we lack the courage to take the risks. Instead, we make excuses for inaction.
When people can walk away from you, let them walk. When people can walk away from you, let them walk.
The great thing about excuses is that no matter what happens, excuses are always there waiting to be used. But the downside of excuses is that nobody really believes them. If you make excuses, they're going to know it and they're going to think less of you. But if you refuse to rely on excuses, people are going to know that too, and they'll admire you for it.
You need large amounts of self-discipline to deal courageously with all the fear-inducing events of your life. Courage is rightly considered the foremost of the virtues, for upon it all others depend. Often, fear is necessary to preserve life, prevent injury, and guard against financial mistakes.
I don't want you to try to talk another person into staying with you, loving you, calling you, caring about you, coming to see you, staying attached to you. I mean, hang up the phone. When people can walk away from you, let them walk.
If you ask people what they regret, especially as they get older, what they generally report is things not done. So they don't regret so much mistakes they've made, although of course people obviously regret mistakes they've made as well. So they don't exactly regret sins of commission, right? Errors that they've actively made. They torment themselves for opportunities that had presented themselves that they did not, let's say, exploit or engage in.
The regret we feel for things that we've done, though intent, only lasts a short period of time. But the regret that we feel for things that we missed out on, that can extend throughout a lifetime. Because most of us are scared, and we choose to lead an easy life. And by doing so, we start to rack up those regrets. But there is a solution. You have to be willing to be bold.
You have a great life in front of you, but your great life is in front of you. It's not behind you. What you did back there ain't got nothing to do with what God got for you. What you did back there was learn the lessons to get you to where you are at this particular moment right here.
Bad decisions, hasty decisions, too fast, and affects the next 20 years of your life because you made the wrong decision. If you'd have just waited, got all your information together, settled yourself, you'd have been better. What makes us make these fast decisions? Fear?
It takes discipline to face your fears so you can conquer them. And that's what discipline is. Discipline means taking the hard road, the uphill road, to do what's right. And regret, in and of itself, it's worthless. So learn and move on.
There are moments that try the human soul so violently and so perplexing that if the truth were told, all of us have had moments that we wanted to throw up our hands and walk away. Particularly painful is discouragement in the life of the believer, because as we travel from season to season, it is not just the perils that we face, but it is seeing the wicked go forward while the righteous are held back. Discouragement can creep in secretly, hide behind clothes, makeup, hairdos. Discouragement is so bold that it will even hide behind a smile. It will always ride to work with you, and if it doesn't catch a ride going to work, it'll catch a ride on the way back home. Discouragement will go into a tent. It will walk right into a Section 8 neighborhood. But don't think that it stops Discouragement will walk right into a middle-class house. It won't just stop there. It'll go in a mansion. And tell you life is not worth living. If you listen at discouragement, it will cause you to make bad decisions. It will cause you to think that life is not worth living. And secretly, behind the facade of a smile and a good morning and a praise the Lord and a how are you, you will wonder if you're ever going to get out of what you're into.
One of the things that we know about life is that it is always changing. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Sometimes you're happy, and sometimes you're sad. Now that's that thing called life. And when we begin to understand and know that, accepting that reality, that we will never ever have things just on an even keel all the time, that you're gonna have some ups and you're gonna have some downs. But during those down moments, that's where the growth takes place. That's where the work is. Anybody can feel good when they have their health, their bills are paid, they have happy relationships, the children are acting normal, business is successful. Anybody could be positive then. Anybody can have faith under those kinds of circumstances. See, but the real challenge of growth, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, comes when you get knocked down. Adversity introduces a man to himself or a woman. How you handle it, that's where the growth takes place.
The ability to learn to say no and not to feel guilty about it, to me, is about the greatest success I have achieved. It's all a part of a process for growing for me. To me, to have the kind of internal strength and internal courage it takes to say, no, I will not let you treat me this way, is what success is all about. I will not be treated this way. I demand only the best for myself.
As you might imagine, I don't think we should spend a lot of time regretting the choices we've made in the past. To spend time brooding over how things went, that's an illusion. What you're doing is suffering pointlessly in the present under the shadow of certain memories. You're telling yourself a story about something that might have been over and over again. How long do you want to do that for?
And sometimes life is going to knock you down. But because you have been knocked down don't mean that you are finished. No. You got some reasons. It might be your own sense of pride and determination in the kind of life that you want to create.
There are people in their 30s and 40s who are still acting like adolescents. And there are even people in their 40s and 50s who are still acting like babies as far as their attitude toward responsibility is concerned. But the large number of people who shirk responsibility can also provide opportunities for you if you are determined to be different. If you decide to be one of the few who embraces responsibility, you can lead, and you will deserve to lead. Churchill said responsibility is the price of greatness. And in my opinion, it's really a rather small price to pay. It means, first of all, that you accept the consequences of your actions. Responsibility means you look to yourself as the source of everything that happens to you. It means that you assume command, regardless of the hardships you may have undergone early in life, or the dozens of people who may have failed to understand you. I'm saying that regardless of the presence of those negative influences in your life, the best thing you can do, the strongest thing, the most empowering thing, and ultimately the wisest thing, is to accept responsibility for your own destiny, plain and simple. If you have enough reasons, you can do the most incredible things. Here's what you might be lacking: a long enough list of reasons. Reasons that drive you, reasons that get you up a little extra early, reasons that keep you up a little extra late. That's what makes the difference.
You should always make decisions with your heart and soul. You can use your brain for math, but when it comes to the actual feel of the decision, you always want to go inward and check it against your heart and soul. Here's the simple test. Does the decision that you're about to make expand you, expand your future, or expand the possibilities of your life? If the answer is yes, then the decision is yes, no matter how terrifying it is.
Other than death, all failure is psychological. Other than death, all failure is psychological. Does not mean that you won't lose some battles, because you will. We all will. But it does mean that as long as you don't surrender, as long as you don't quit, then you haven't failed.
Here are some action exercises that you can do. Make a decision today to invest in yourself and getting better, as if your future depends on it, because it does. Identify the most important skills you have that determine the quality and quantity of results you get at your work, and make a plan to get better in each one. Set excellent performance in your work as a goal, and then determine exactly what you will need to do every day to join the top 20% or better in your field.
Sometimes I see people succeeding who didn't pray nearly as hard, work nearly as long, and it seems like they seemingly have moments of victory in close proximity so I could see it. Not while I am having a similar experience, but while all hell has broken loose in my life and I am going through agony and tragedy, seemingly they are having victory and triumph. And if you're not careful, the very sight of their prosperity becomes your agony. And seeing them go forward will be a source of such continued frustration that it is not your tests that baffles you, but their success agonizingly displayed before you makes you despair of life, until David says in 37:1, fret not thyself over evildoers, how they prosper in their own way, they shall soon be cut off. He says, in other words, don't make a permanent decision over a temporary circumstance. He says, don't allow a moment of agony to make you draw a conclusion about life prematurely.
I was going through a major challenge in my life that was wearing me out, that was using me. And one of my students told me in a class that I was teaching, Lessons in Truth, she said, Les, until you handle it with grace, it will stay in your face. And it stayed there a long time. Are you going through it, or are you growing through it? Are you bigger and better because of it? Because it's not going to leave you until you grow through it. Are you learning anything, or are you doing it over and over and over again? Insanity is doing the same thing in the same way, expecting a different outcome. The biggest challenge is to know what's happening. This is a part of this thing we call life. This too shall pass. And maintaining perspective, putting it in perspective. How do we get stuck? A friend of mine working on a job, loved the company very much, expected to retire there. And one day they called him in the office, asked him for his badge and identification, told him he was fired and he had to leave then. He was devastated. And if you came anywhere near him, he would tell you his story, as we all have stories. Even when he got a job, he went on the job telling anybody who would listen how they fired him unjustly. And he always ended with, it wasn't fair. Life isn't fair. It's not fair that birds eat worms, and they do.
Don't deviate, don't procrastinate, don't become frustrated. All you have to do to win this battle is stay on track.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
I fought a good fight. I fought for my kids, and I fought for what was right, and I fought for my good health, and I fought for a good career that would bless my family. I fought a good fight. The encroachment Opposites are in conflict, and we're in the middle. And if you want something valuable, you got to fight for it.
You have comeback power when something happens to you. Don't buy into what has happened to you. Buy into, I'm getting up out of here. I'm going to change this situation. This does not work for me, and I don't have the luxury of being depressed. I need to clear my head.
Yes, we can see avoidance of responsibility all the time in both our personal and professional lives. We can see that most people aren't as successful as they wish they were. Do you see there's a connection between these two very common phenomena? I hope you'll understand that it's in your best interests to take responsibility for everything you do. But that's only the beginning. I'm also going to suggest that many times it's even best to accept responsibility for the mistakes of others, especially when you're in a managerial or leadership role.
What do you do when you tried and failed and you want to quit and you want to give up? Sometimes you can be blessed and be unhappy because even though things are going right, they're not going according to what you had believed and expected, and you know that something is missing out of your life.
You got to clear your head so that the decision that you make represents the best in you. Be still and know that you're going to get through this. You're going to get through this. You got to assure yourself. You have to encourage yourself. You have to clear your mind.
The great thing about excuses, and the really dangerous thing about them, is that no matter what happens, excuses are always there waiting to be used. But the downside of excuses, even good ones, is that nobody really believes them. If you make excuses, they're going to know it, and they're going to think less of you. But if you refuse to rely on excuses, people are going to know that too, and they'll admire you for it. This is especially true in business. One of the classic examples happened about 15 years ago. A widely advertised healthcare product from a leading manufacturer was shown to be unsafe, and the company responded by pulling every single box off the shelves at a cost of millions of dollars. Was the company destroyed? Hardly. If they had done anything else, there would have been a tremendous loss of confidence. Instead, there was honest acceptance of responsibility for a mistake. Contrast this with what happened recently to a leading manufacturer of computer chips. When a new microprocessor didn't perform up to expectations, the company made excuses. It was a minor problem, something that would crop up once in a lifetime, and so forth. Were these excuses valid? Maybe, maybe not. But it doesn't really matter, does it? So many people use excuses, but nobody really buys them. That accepting responsibility is one of the highest forms of human maturity. To put yourself on the line, a willingness to be accountable, is really the defining characteristic of adulthood. Anyone who has raised children knows how true this is. Just look at a baby during the first few years of life. Every facial expression, every tentative word has one message for the baby's parents. I am totally dependent on you. I can't be held responsible for the consequences. I can't do anything for myself even if I try. After all, I'm just a baby. 10 or 12 years later, of course, as the boy or girl enters adolescence, this message to the parents will be very different. It will sound something like this: I want to be totally independent. Why don't you just leave me alone? I don't want to do anything but think about myself. I certainly don't want to accept any responsibility. It's only when we're at last grown up that the first two messages, I'm totally independent of you and I'm totally dependent on you, finally turn into you can depend on me, which is the truly adult outlook.
The night seasons are not the end. The bad breaks, the disappointments, that's simply another step on the way to your destiny.
But let me tell you what ought to cause great joy to come to your life is if you'd stop comparing yourself to other people and you would just remember where you came from and remember where you started. You're doing more. You're seeing more. You're achieving more. But if you start comparing yourself with someone else, you can get discouraged because they're doing more maybe than you're doing.
Sooner or later, all of us face situations in which we must decide whether to accept responsibility for a problem or look for ways to avoid responsibility. Let's look at the various options and decisions that are now open to you. First, there's the role played by intention. In other words, was the outcome of your action what you intended it to be? And if it was not, should you still accept responsibility for that outcome? This is a very serious issue in the way we think about responsibility. In many areas of criminal law, for instance, the intention to commit a crime must be present in order for the accused to be held criminally responsible. This intention is something quite different from mere negligence. But we don't have to enter a courtroom to see the important role intention plays in accepting responsibility ourselves or assigning it to others. Don't you remember when you were a kid and you left the screen door open so that the cat ran outside and was lost all afternoon? What did you say to avoid responsibility? You said, it was an accident. You said, I didn't mean to do that. As I pointed out earlier, there are lots of people who still use these childlike rationalizations well into their middle age. But if and when you decide you want to be an adult, you begin to see the whole question of intention as nothing more than another opportunity for excuse-making, and you should refuse to participate in it.
If you get beat, unless you're dead, you are not defeated, and you have not failed. What you've done is you've learned. You've gained experience, and you're still alive. So get up and go get after it.